You can almost picture it. Here Jesus is, and he's just walking around. He's coming off this moment where he just healed this leper. And there's almost this buzz, there's almost this anticipation of what might he do next. And he walks on in to the town, and he's greeted by this man. The man simply just asked for one simple thing, really. Just a moment. He feels almost like he's burdening Jesus. You can picture it, this conversation. Sir, I'm sorry to disturb you. I just really have a simple request. Can I just get a moment of your time? And you can picture him standing there looking at Jesus, and Jesus is just silent for a moment. He's waiting for him to explain what's going on. And as he looks in his eyes, he sees the compassion. He sees the true heart of Jesus. That this man was gentle, but yet he had this, I don't know, he had this something about him, something different. And he goes on and to talk, and he's racking his mind of I've heard many things about this man. There's this crowd following him down from the mountaintop. And why is he such a big deal? I've heard all these things about this man. I don't quite know why he's so special, but I've heard these radical things. And I think now I'm starting to understand it. When I look at him, when I look at Jesus, I start to understand the depth of who he really is. So I told him about my servant. See, he was very ill. Close to death, actually. And I just simply asked, would you come and heal him? Like, would you just heal him? That's all I wanted, Jesus. Would you just heal him? And then he looked at me and he said, lead the way. Take me there. Let's go now. Hold up. Like, that's not possible. Like, does Jesus understand that I am a Roman and he is a Jew? That's not allowed. I'm not worthy to be in his presence, let alone him be in my house with my servant and myself. No. That can't happen. I just simply told him, just speak it. Just speak it and it'll be done. Like, you are this man who everybody talks about. There's something different about you. You are this guy who people follow. Just speak it and it will be done. I understand a little bit about authority and power. After all, I am a Roman centurion. When I tell people who are under me to go, they go. They don't hesitate. If I say jump, they jump. If I say bring me this, they bring it to me without a hesitation. I have authority. But this man, this Jesus, he has a different type of authority within him. I mean, he's not this jacked up, burly type of manly man. I don't know. He's different. He has this authority, though, that when he says something, everybody does it. And then he smiled at me. And all he said is, go home. It's done. So I went home. And I couldn't believe it. There's something different about that man. And I'm starting to understand who he may truly be. You see, I read that story in Matthew, and I've heard it over and over again. But do we understand the power in that story? Do we understand what was maybe really happening within that Roman's heart? do we understand even Jesus' response to the fullest? I love this story. I love it because I think it demonstrates a faith that in today's culture, maybe some of us are lacking. Here's this Roman centurion, and he has faith in Jesus, a Jew. It really doesn't make sense culturally. And when you read the story, if you read it in full, it's found in Matthew 8, and we're going to read part of it in a hot second here. You start to understand that there might be more that happens in this. There may have just been a stirring in this Roman's heart. There may have been something that was going on beforehand as Jesus comes off the mountain and into the town. But I think the cultural background of it is so rich because it shows us deeply of who Jesus is. Matthew 8, this is what it says. Jesus returned to Capernaum. A Roman officer came and pleaded with him, "Lord, my young servant lies in bed, paralyzed and in terrible pain." Jesus said, "I'll come and heal him." But the officer said, "Lord, I am not worthy to have you come into my home. Say the word from where you are, and my servant will be healed. I know this because I am under the authority of my superior officers, and I have authority over my soldiers. I only need to say, 'Go,' and they go, and 'Come,' and they come. And if I say to my slaves, 'Do this,' they do it." And when Jesus heard this, he was amazed. Turning to those who were following him, he said, "I tell you the truth. I haven't seen faith like this in all of Israel. And I tell you this, many Gentiles will come from all over the world, from east and west, and sit down with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob at the feast in the kingdom of heaven. But many Israelites, those for whom the kingdom was prepared, will be thrown into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Then he turned to the Roman officer, "Go back home, and because you believed, it's happened." The young servant was healed that same hour. When you start to look at this, you start to understand, obviously, that the Roman guard is not Jewish. That's pretty obvious. And when you start to remember back in those times, Rome was a pretty dominant empire. And so they had this almost political power, essentially, over the Jews. But yet, this Roman guard shows up and initiates a conversation with Jesus, a Jewish teacher. He didn't go to one of his own doctors or anything. He went to this Jewish teacher, Jesus. And not only that, but he went to Jesus for his servant, not himself. He didn't come and say, "Jesus, I am sick." He said, "My servant lies in bed, paralyzed, and is very ill." Not a selfish reason. His servant. And see, under the Roman law, he actually, as the guard, he actually could have killed his servant because his servant in this moment is no longer doing what he is essentially bought or paid to do. He is no longer serving him. What's he doing? He's laying in bed watching Netflix. Right? He's no longer doing what he's supposed to be doing. Under Roman law, he could have killed him. He could have outed him. He could have mafia bossed him and put a hit out. But instead, he comes before Jesus and he says, would you heal him? And what's intriguing is Jesus doesn't hesitate. He doesn't hesitate to offer his services. Jesus doesn't say, well, it's going to cost you this, or he doesn't say, you know what, you're a Roman. He doesn't say, yeah, you know what, you like MSU and not U of M, I'm sorry. He doesn't hesitate. There's no really conditions with that. He just comes and he says, take me there. But under the customs, a Gentile was not supposed to enter a Jew's house. But this Roman guard takes it a little bit further. Not only does he know the custom, that he really culturally isn't supposed to enter the house, he also says himself is not worthy. It's no longer just about a house, but it's about him. and his servant. You see, he goes against culture and he takes it even a step farther. And what's crazy is that he started to talk about his authority as a Roman soldier. So he knows something's different about Jesus than the other Jewish teachers. He says, just speak it. That's what I do to my guys. And if I say go and grab this, they do it. If I say go, they go. Come, they come. Like, just speak it. Here he is, a Roman, having radical faith in Jesus to heal without even being present. It's this Roman having great faith in Jesus, in the words that come out of his mouth, the word of Jesus, rather than just his presence. And look what Jesus says. It's incredible. It says Jesus marveled at it in some translations. Like, he not only does that, but he actually turns to those who was following him, and he literally points it out. He starts to talk about the Gentiles and the Jews. The Gentiles will come from the east and the west, and they will sit with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. These three guys who are incredibly prominent and worshipped essentially in the Jewish culture and held to a high standard. The Gentiles are going to sit at the feast with these guys. Gentiles are dirty. They're not worthy to sit at the table. But yet Jesus says not only are they going to be at the table, they're going to sit with these men. And then he turns it upside down even more, and he goes, and there might be some of you Jewish people. You know, the ones who originally this kingdom was prepared for? Y'all might not make it. Y'all might not make it. There might be gnashing of the teeth. That doesn't sound like fun. And yet, Jesus stands there and then he turns to this Roman and he says, your faith is incredible. I haven't seen anything like it. It's done. Go. And he was healed. You see, it's not the strength of your faith that saves you, but the strength of him upon whom you rely on. It's not the strength of your faith, it's the strength of him. It's the strength of Jesus. The Roman officer had incredible, deep faith in Jesus, yes. But it wasn't his faith that necessarily saved him. It was the faith in who Jesus was. It was the faith in Jesus that saved him. Not the strength of his faith, but because it was in Jesus. If he had faith in another god or an idol, his servant wouldn't have been saved. But it's the strength of the faith upon whom he relies on, Jesus. And when we have faith in who Jesus is and who he said he is, we too can see dynamic things change in our lives. When we have faith in who Jesus is and who he said he is, we too can see dynamic things happening in our lives. I've always been curious after some of these stories when I read them, how did their lives change? Like this servant, can you imagine him watching The Office on Netflix? And out of nowhere, he's like, I can feel my legs. That's different. And then he starts wiggling his toes a little bit, and he's like, whoa, those things haven't moved in a while. And he kind of like moves the covers off, and he's like, let's see what happens. And he gets up, and he stands, and he's like, okay. And then he like takes a step and he's like, wow. Okay. And he's like doing another one. Next thing you know, he's like, oh, we're sprinting. We're going. He's like, this is good. Like, I'm back. This is different. Like, he's back and he's healed. And why? Because of a man named Jesus. I should run more. Because of a man named Jesus. This servant's life was radically changed. This Roman's life was radically changed. Their faith, I can only imagine what happened in those moments. But I also remember so oftentimes walking in those moments, I probably can picture it being that servant thinking like, this is it. I'm never going to walk again. I'm not going to go run again. I can't go play sports. I can't work. This is it. He must have felt like he's in a valley, dark valley. But here's the thing about God is he'll never lead you to a valley that he will not be walking with you in. He'll never lead you to a valley that he's not willing to walk with you through. Like, he's not going to lead you to a valley and say, good luck. I'm going to take the helicopter to the other side. I'll meet you there. It might be a while for you to walk through, but I'll be there. He doesn't leave you. If he walks up to a valley with you, he's going to walk with you through it. Jesus is a God who is consistent. He's faithful. And he's going to walk with you no matter what you're going through. And so if you're feeling like you're in a valley today, let's just call it what it is. If you feel like you're in a valley today, if you feel like there's no hope, if you feel like everything is hopeless and you're losing sight of what really is coming on the other side, trust me when I say this, like you've been and you are in good company. You're in good company. Because God has had others right there exactly where you are. Confused, wandering, beaten up, bruised, bloodied, maybe barely even just crawling right now. He's had others there. There's a book in the New Testament, Hebrews. And in Hebrews 11, there's essentially what is kind of like termed this Hall of Fame of faith, right? So this is like if you are, a Christian, you would love to have your name in the Hall of Fame of faith. You want the gold jacket. Like, this is incredible, right? Hall of Fame. Everybody wants to make it to the Hall of Fame. And it's this list that goes on, and it says, like, it talks about this incredible faith that these people have had. In verses 1-3, this is what it says. Faith is the confidence that what we hope for will actually happen. It gives us assurance about things we cannot see. And through their faith, the people in days of old earned a good reputation. And by faith, we understand that the entire universe was formed at God's command. That what we now see did not come from anything that can be seen. This faith in God. If you start to read it, it's this whole entire chapter. And it starts to go through all of these different people of who have made it to this Hall of Fame of faith. Starts even from the very beginning, with Abel and his offering that he brought before God. Enoch. Let's talk about Noah. Right? God calls him to do this radical thing and build an ark. And imagine him driving to Home Depot with his truck and trailer being like, I need all of it. All that wood. And then, can you call over to that store, and that store and tell them, I need all of it. I'm also going to need some nails, by the way. And he just loads it up and he starts building this ginormous ark, this boat. And they're like, what are you doing? He's like, it's going to rain soon. And they're like, no, it's not. It's nice, sunny, clear skies. It hasn't rained here in a while. You're crazy. He's like, I'm telling you. It's about to rain. And y'all are going to get wet. Nope. And he has this radical faith where he alone kind of is like building this radical thing, an ark. And then out of nowhere, what happens? It rains. And what? He loads up and they set, onto the water. And it's incredible, though, because when he was called to do this, it was ridiculous. God called him to do something that was ridiculous. Didn't make sense. But he had faith. Let's talk about Abraham, Father Abraham. He's a good guy. He had to have faith as he walked with God and with his wife, of having a child. It didn't happen for many years. And then out of nowhere, they're really old. And I mean really, really, really old. And then God says, I'm going to bless you with a child. And what's her response? She laughs, and she's like, yo, God, I don't know if he knows this or not. I'm old. I don't know how that's going to really work. Biology, that is not really, doesn't make sense. But yet, they get this son. And then what happens? God's like, hey, you know that son Isaac? You should go take him. We're going to do a little offering sacrifice. Sweet. So he loads up his son. Son's following behind him. And they've been here before, right? We've gone to the altar before. Imagine them carrying the wood. They got the fire. And there's got to be that point where Isaac starts putting 2 and 2 together to make 6. And he realizes, we're missing a 2 here, and that's the lamb. And so he just asks, hey, Dad, we're missing a part of this. But Abraham had faith. He's like, God will provide. God will provide. Comes to that point where Abraham's about to kill his son. A son he's waited years and years and years for. Knife in hand. And he's about to do it, and then God stops and intervenes, and he provides. Faith, though, something ridiculous. Abraham, go take your son and kill him. Because I told you to. He hasn't done anything wrong. Just kill him. It's ridiculous, right? But yet Abraham had to have the faith. And it goes on. You have Jacob and Joseph. And let's not even get going about Moses here, right? And Rahab and Gideon. And what about my boy David? We all know I love David, right? Samson, Samuel, all of these guys had to have ridiculous faith and walk in ridiculous faith in what God was doing and what he would be doing in their lives and lives around them. Ridiculous faith. And when you start to look at them, like they all had to walk through a valley too. And God was walking with them. It would have been hard, difficult, and maybe even for some of them painful. And I think that oftentimes our world and maybe even us get the thought of faith in Jesus as maybe this should just be an easy path. Oh, wouldn't that be nice? You see, but choosing Jesus is not choosing the easy path. Choosing Jesus is not choosing the easy life. It's not choosing the easy path. Like when you choose him, he says it. You'll face things just like I have. In the Kyle translations, sometimes it says like, you're going to go through stuff that maybe just really is not fun and sucks. I did that too. And then he tells people to pick up the cross. Now, I don't know if y'all remember the story. Jesus went to the cross and died. The cross is literally this symbol of death. It was the most excruciating, painful, horrifying form of death that the Romans came up with, and they loved it, and they were good at it. Like, you didn't die on a cross from like bleeding out. You had nails in your hands and everything. Like, you don't die from that. You die from asphyxiation, like you suffocate to death hanging there. That's not fun. But yet Jesus goes, hey, pick up your cross and follow me. And you're like, what? You want me to pick up the thing that means death and walk with you? Yeah, I do. I don't know about you, but if I was back then and Jesus said those direct words to me, I would have looked at him and been like, you're ridiculous. You're calling me to have what and to do what? That's ridiculous. No way. But yet Jesus time and time and time and time again calls us to have ridiculous faith in what he is and what he is about to do. And when we put our faith in Jesus, it's not us saying we know this path is going to be easy. It's us saying we know we're going to have to trust him. We know there's hardship, struggles, and pain along the way, but through it all, Christ is going to walk with us, and he's going to see us through. He walked with those in the Old Testament, walked with them in the New Testament, and he saw them through all the troubles, the trials, and hardships. So why do we think sometimes that he's going to leave us out to dry? Why do we think he's not going to do the same with us? I think when it comes to this idea of faith and putting our faith in Jesus and what he has done and what he is doing, what he said he will do, we struggle with it. Because I think we get to a point where we're like, it just doesn't make sense. And then you start to really think about our religion. You start to think about what we believe. And if I'm being honest with you, if you just read it, right? We believe in a God. We believe in God who sent his son, a guy, and he lived here with us. But yet he did nothing wrong. Never sinned. And by the way, he came from the ghetto. He wasn't even that good of a guy. Like, according to culture, he came from the ghetto where nobody ever, good comes from. But yet, this is God incarnate in flesh. And then he dies because his God the Father told him that he's going to die. And he died for our sins. And then he was buried. And 3 days later, he came back. It sounds ridiculous to our world. Am I right? Because our faith is ridiculous, and it has to be ridiculous. Because if it was so believable, it wouldn't be so radical. Look at how Jesus operated. He was always operating radically. He flipped everything upside down. And I think he loved every moment of it. I like to think, I said this last week, I like to think Jesus is not this long, flowing, perfectly groomed beard in a nice white robe holding a baby sheep in his arms, sitting there, just gentle, singing lullabies. I don't think that's my Jesus. My Jesus is the dude who likes to flip tables. My Jesus is the dude who likes to have a little bit of a little spaz in him. You know what I'm saying? He's got a little oomph up in there, and he's ready to go. He's not crazy. He's deliberate, and he flips everything upside down, and I love it. My Jesus is fierce. He's passionate. He's radical. He's countercultural. He's not a trendsetter. He's a culture changer. He changes everything. And I think that's why we have such a hard time with our faith. Because it's ridiculous. It's countercultural. I remember going through school and I remember reading some of these things, and we had to take all these history classes. And I've said it before, I hate reading. And I had to read, though, because I had this test coming up. And so I was reading about all these, the old school guys. Calvin, Luther, Augustine, and then John Wesley. I like John Wesley. I think he gets me a little bit. John Wesley. And there's this moment where John in his journal wrote this quote, and it kind of rocked me a little bit. And this is what it says. Preach faith until you have it. And once you have it, you will preach it. I'm like, okay, John. I read one quote by you, so I think we're best friends now. So I'm reading my book, and I'm talking to him in my mind, maybe out loud. I'm like, Johnny, can I call you Johnny? We're going to call you Johnny. So Johnny, preach faith till you have it. That doesn't make sense. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm confused. That's okay, though. But then once you have it, you will preach it. So you want me to preach it. You want me to talk about faith, even when I don't have it, maybe when I don't know it. And then once I start developing it, once I start growing it, once I start learning it, I will preach it. And have you ever spoken to a book expecting it to speak back? They don't. Not even books on tape. They just keep going. They kind of ignore you. But as I sit here and I think about that quote, I often wonder how many times we need to speak faith in our lives. How many times do we need to take a moment and speak faith into what we're walking into? How many times do we need to speak belief into overcoming what we're about to go through in life? How many times do we need to just take a moment and say, like, God, I have faith in you, and I don't know what that looks like, but I'm going to walk in that. I'm going to trust in that. And then the next step, you're like, God, I still have faith in you, and I don't know what that looks like, but I'm going to trust in that. And you can keep walking as you keep speaking faith in your life. I wonder how many times we just need to take a moment, just a moment, and acknowledge that Jesus is different. He's a radical guy who requires a ridiculous amount of faith, even when we don't understand it. How many times do we just need to speak faith into our lives? How many times do we need to pray faith into our lives, speak it in not only our lives, but others, and live it out? Even when it doesn't make sense, and even maybe when you don't have it. How can you live out faith in your life, even when it doesn't seem to be there? Because I believe that when we do that, we start to develop it. I believe that when we start to walk in faith, when we start to speak faith and preach faith, we start to develop it. And God is like, oh, I'm going to show you what faith looks like. Continue to speak it. Continue to pray it. Continue to walk with me. And he's going to continue to walk with us on the journey. And over and over and over again, I feel like, and maybe it's just me, that I get to a point in life and I'm like, God, like, would you say something? Like a bright LED light in the sky that just says, this way, Kyle, with like an arrow would be so helpful sometimes. Amen? Instead, I don't get it. Instead, I stand there and I'm like, God, you're going to do something? You're going to show up? And maybe all he's asking me to do is go, just one step. What a shame it would be if we were waiting for God to say something while he's waiting on us to do something. Ooh, we're going to say that one again. What a shame it would be if we were waiting for God to say something when God is waiting for us to do something. If some of us felt a little nudge, it is not indigestion. It is nothing besides conviction. That maybe, just maybe, we've been sitting far too long saying, God, would you say something? And God is saying, would you do something? Just take a step. It doesn't even have to be big, just a little one. And I'm present in that. What a shame that we could miss out on something because God just wants us to take the step of faith to walk with him. I look at how God called these great people in the Hall of Fame to simply have great faith in him. And in the process, they had to move and walk in the faith even when they didn't have it, but they developed it. David. Oh, man, my boy David. David, as a young man, steps up to fight this giant who, let's just be real, he's standing there and he's hearing this giant call out in the distance. Who dares to challenge me? And what does David say? He looks at the guys and he's like, y'all gonna let him talk like that? He's questioning our God. And then David goes on, and I love it. David goes on, and he's like, well, I'll go fight him. And so, like, Saul puts on his armor on him, and David's like, this is clunky. Nope, and he starts shedding it, and then he picks up stones. He picks up 5 stones, and he has his little slingshot, and he walks out, right? As he's walking, I picture him, he's probably not that big, so I relate to him. And he's like, who is this uncircumcised Philistine? Yo, that's like, as my boy Michael Todd says, that's like biblical cussing. He's like, who is this uncircumcised Philistine who's challenging my God? And he puts a stone in, and I just picture him like that game face. I think he put some clay on, like, a little war paint, and he just puts it in there, and he starts whipping it, and he's like, it's on, and he just launches that thing. And it hits Goliath, and what happens? Done. Out for the count. KO. We win. Did David have faith that the first stone was going to take him out? He picked up 5. I'm just saying. I don't know. But it happened, right? So he's sitting there and he's like, we going to go for it. And I think he's ready. He's already like mid-launch and he's like, we got to reload. He's big. And then it hits him and he's like, we don't got to reload. We good. And I picture him turning around being like, I told you. Like that's it, right? Like ridiculous faith for ridiculous moments. What a shame. Ooh, what a shame it would be if we were just sitting here saying, God, you should say something. And God's like, do something. Pick up your stones. Pick up the things in your life that people might look at and say, that's not good enough. And just give it a shot. And let's see what I can do. See, these Hall of Famers, they developed faith. They trusted it, even when it wasn't there fully. And it grew. And it grew, and it grew, and it grew. And it continues over and over and over. So how about us? Like how about us as we sit? What kind of faith do we have? Do we have faith that our rocks are enough? Do we have faith that our lives are enough? Even as we are walking, for some of us, and walking in a valley that seems so dark and so lonely and maybe even cold, and we might not even feel like he's there, do we have faith that he's still walking right beside us, holding us, guiding us every step of the way? Do we have faith in that? When it comes to our faith, I wonder how often we feed our fears compared to our faith. I wonder how often we feed our fears in life over our faith. We can be terrified. We can be scared. Things might not be looking like they're going the right way, and we have a choice to make. Are you going to feed the fear? Or are you going to feed the faith? Go and read Hebrews 11. And over again, I think you can understand that there's a choice that had to be made for each and every one of them. Am I going to feed my fear or my faith? David could have fed the fear and just stood back with all the other guys and said, yeah, he's really big. Somebody should go fight him. But not me, because I could die. Or do you feed the faith and do you pick up your rocks and you start walking out and you throw the game face on, you put your war paint on and you say, let's go. Let's go. When God calls you to do something ridiculous, how much faith and trust do we have in him over our fears and failures? Like, what ridiculous thing is God calling you to do that you need to pray, speak, and walk in faith today? What ridiculous thing? What is that thing that God has laid on your heart? Maybe that thing that God is already starting to just plant a seed. Maybe for some of us, it's just a seed. Maybe for some of us, it's a ginormous tree. Or maybe for some of us, we're just growing in it. What ridiculous thing is God calling you to do that you need to speak, pray, and live in the faith, even though you might not have it right now? There must have been some crazy looks. There must have been some crazy looks when the inventor of the automobile looked at somebody and said, I have this idea. Check it out. There's going to be this thing called a car. And it's going to go down the road with a motor in it. You're going to drive it. There's like no horses attached to it. I know. Doesn't it sound great? And people will have looked at him and been like, what are you talking about? No, it ain't going to happen. And he had this ridiculous idea. You know it, right? A ridiculous idea, crazy idea. When you're talking about the first car. A buggy goes down the road, 4 wheels, no horses attached to it, but a motor. Like this thing made out of metal. And it's going to make the wheels turn around. That's cool. I'm going to make it. People looked at them and they're like, no, you're crazy. Okay, a car's crazy, right? But like, what about the airplane? Hold up. I'm going to make this big like tube type of thing. And I'm going to put these wings on it. And we're going to put a motor in it too. And it's going to spin this thing really quick. Really quick. Don't laugh at that, Josh. Gosh. And then it's going to like, and it's going to take off and it's going to fly and people are going to ride in it. They're like, you want me to get in a tube thing with some wings and a little motor that spins like this, and you think we're going to fly in it? Are you crazy? Maybe. But I have the faith to get it done, so I'm going to do it. Here these guys are, like there's all these examples that you can talk about. They have a ridiculous thing that they felt called or wanting to do, and they had faith in what they were going to do, that they built it and made it happen. What is God calling you to do that is absolutely ridiculous, that doesn't make sense to us? That if we start to speak it, pray it, and live it out in our lives, that God is going to say, I'm going to make the ridiculous become reality. And when it becomes reality, everybody's going to look at you and say, that's not possible without God. So what ridiculous dream is he literally calling you to until it becomes reality? What ridiculous thing is he calling you to until it becomes reality? You can almost picture that conversation again. You can almost picture the people standing around as they heard this Roman guard approach Jesus, having no idea what was about to be said, having no idea what was about to go down. You can almost picture and feel maybe even the anxiety and the emotions that some of these other Jews had as this Roman officer walked up to Jesus. And he simply asked a ridiculous thing. To heal his servant. And then this Roman guard said, you don't even have to be there. Don't even show up, Jesus. Just say it. It sounds ridiculous. It sounds so ridiculous. But Jesus' words alone would do the work. God's in the business even today with taking the ridiculous, the unreal, the impossible things in life, and not just making them possible, but making them our reality. And I believe that if we speak his truth and we speak our faith in him into our lives and into those around us, that we're going to see dynamic things happen in our lifetime. And I believe God wants to do it. I believe that God just sits there sometimes and says, just ask and take that step. Take the step and say, God, like I'm trusting you in this. We're gathering in a building right now that maybe about a decade ago, somebody said and had this ridiculous idea of planting a church here in this community. Like it sounds ridiculous. I'm standing here today, and I'm telling you, true vulnerable, like honesty here. Kyle as a senior pastor, a lead pastor, is still sounding very ridiculous. But it's becoming reality. And it's becoming possible. And God's doing incredible things. We're living in the ridiculous. We're living in the impossible. We're living in the unreal. We're living in the things that don't make sense. Do we get that? We are living in an honest culture that says, this thing doesn't make sense. You praise a guy who died and rose again? That don't make sense. And then we're like, yeah, it doesn't. But let me tell you what else he did. He took me from a pit, a place that I was addicted and I was bad. I was messed up. I was tore up and jacked up from the floor up. And he made me into something where I'm standing and I'm preaching and praying. Y'all, that don't make sense. He takes people who are unqualified, who are unworthy, and says, I'm going to do something with you. Just watch what I can do when you take that step and you speak faith. So what are we doing today? What are we doing today? Are we walking in the faith of a faithful God who's been faithful before and he will be faithful again? Are we speaking that faith, and are we taking the step each and every day to live in that faith? That's my hope. My hope is that after today we can walk in the ridiculous. And we can smile in the face of it and say, I know it's ridiculous, but I have faith that it's going to become a reality. I have faith that I'm going to make it through. I have faith.